Let's get more on this now from former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, just back from his tour as U.S. Ambassador to Japan. And Chris, let me start with you. You're also a former prosecutor. You're close with Chris Wray, the former director of the FBI. You have a lot of sources in and around that community. What are you hearing about all this?
You know, George, I wouldn't use a word like panic when it relates to the men and women of the FBI because they work under really stressful situations. But I will tell you that they are stunned by what's happening. When you talk about the list that they were asked for, let's remember something. None of these agents who worked on the January 6th cases volunteered. It's not the way it works. In fact, at the FBI, they do the opposite. They don't want you volunteering and self-selecting for an investigation because that may mean you bring some bias to it. You go and you select these people. So they were instructed by their bosses to work on the January 6th cases. And what happened as a result of that? Hundreds of convictions in front of juries, in front of judges that were appointed by both Republican and Democratic administrations. So they're saying to themselves, what exactly was infirmed about the investigations and about their work? Their work resulted in convictions that were brought by juries or guilty pleas and that were accepted by Republican and Democratic judges. And so if the president wants to pardon those people, that's his right to do. But it's not then his right to fire these folks. And let me tell you, they're all civil service protected, George. None of them are political appointees. So what's going to happen for these folks who don't go voluntarily is they're going to file grievances and lawsuits, and they're ultimately going to win them. And the last piece I'd say is this. Understand how long it takes to get a new FBI agent on board. If you fire hundreds, if not thousands, it'd be thousands on this list of FBI agents, it takes 12 to 18 months to get them on board. By the time you go through the interviewing process, the vetting process, then they go to Quantico for their training, and then become onboarded as a brand new FBI agent. In the threat assessment we have right now across the world, to lose that many agents and then take a year to a year and a half to try to replace them is incredibly dangerous for our national security. And for what? Because they did their jobs. And if the president wants to do his by pardoning people, well, I disagree with pardoning people who violently attacked police officers on Capitol Hill. It's his right under the Constitution to do it. But this is overboard, and it's not going to work.
Rahm, we've never seen a move like this before from a president. What's the likely impact?
Well, it's going to be dramatic. I mean, George, a couple points. On Tuesday, the president's going to host Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. He did exactly this, attacking the Justice Department inside Israel. It turned the country inside out. The defense forces warned him your deterrence is going to be degraded, and you had October 7th, the worst killing of Jews since the Holocaust. Now look, the bureaucracy of the Justice Department, and as well as the FBI, they can be running a campaign of internal vengeance or external vigilance. And it's one or the other. They can't do both. And we've seen this movie before, and it ended in October 7th. The Chinese are hacking us and cyber attacking, and the North Koreans constantly. The FBI and the Justice Department are key to it. That is also true about terrorist actions. And I'll tell you one example. When I was Chief of Staff, a young man in the intelligence agencies found a word that he said did not make sense on a communication. A lot of people said, oh, it's nothing, forget about it. We encouraged him to pursue it. We all did. And he pursued it and ended up being the young man in Denver, bought 12 backpacks, a lot of chemicals, and was driving driving east to New York. We arrested him eventually. You have the FBI agents who are confronting China, North Korea, Russia, our enemies, Iran, who are cyber attacking the United States constantly, lawyers who are also just as recently prosecuting a case against a Treasury official, handing over secrets to the Chinese on economic data. You can either be focused on internal vengeance and the campaign that we're doing, or external vigilance. Our guard is down. We know how this movie ends, and it ends like October 7th. That was a mistake for Israel. We need not make that mistake. This is dangerous, and I totally agree with Chris on this very point. These officers did not volunteer. They took the assignment to do their job, and they prosecuted. There was juries. These people on January 6th, they committed crimes and most dangerously killed officers or harmed them. Police officers.
Chris,
they served the time for that.
You mentioned that a lot of these agents are likely to bring legal action to protect their jobs. We're seeing this kind of testing of the legal limits with a lot of these executive orders from the president, the firing of the inspector generals as well. I guess my question is, does the president care whether or not this faces legal challenges? You just want to make the point?
No, he wants to make the point. In fact, he kind of likes the legal challenges because then it takes it off his plate. He gets to make the statement, the aggressive statement of firing inspectors general, or in this case, what he's doing at the Justice Department and the FBI, and then it gets handed over to the courts. And if the courts overturn him, he blames it on the courts and says these are awful judges, even though many of the ones that have reversed some of his actions are appointed by him. And that's what he'll do. No, he has no problem with doing this. Look, I warned about this for a year before this election, that this was going to be much different than the first term. Donald Trump knows what it's like to be president now. He knows what the ramifications for actions are and are not. And his view is, I'm going to do everything I want to do. And if the courts want to reverse it later, that's fine. George, it's like when I was governor. He called me at the early part of my administration when I had a $10 billion deficit. And he said to me, look, this is what you do, declare bankruptcy. And I said, Donald, I can't. I'm a state. I'm not allowed to declare bankruptcy. He goes, do it anyway. It'll go to the courts. It'll land there for 2 years. They'll forget about all this and you'll look better. That's the way he approaches those things. That was 2010, George. It's no different 15 years later.
Rahm, you know, you of course were served in the White House. You helped draft executive orders, helped draft executive actions, but we've never seen the kind of scope that we're seeing right now. And Democrats seem a little flummoxed about how to respond.
Look, I have a general rule look, the Democrats are in the minority, George. They don't have a bucket to spit in and a window to throw it out of. So you have to have kind of a guiding North Star. Litigation, communication, mobilization. And you got to decide which ones go into which category. Example A, this recent decision on USAID foreign aid, while I don't agree with it, I wouldn't go die on that hill. On the executive order, as a perfect example, executive order dealt with DEI at schools. We just had a report that showed that at the worst time in 30 years, our 8th graders can't read, a third of them. And there was no kind of discussion of that, but there was an executive order here. That to me is about communication, and that to me is about where Democrats can stand up and say, let's deal with the reading crisis. It's about reading, writing, and math, not about D, E, and I. And go take that battle on, because that is defined where we want to focus, where the American people are. Look, the Oval Office, George, comes with a tool called the bully pulpit. And right now, we're 100% bully and 0% pulpit. And that's going to come back, and the Democrats need to decide which areas they want to fight on. Example on the inspector generals. It's clearly against the law. I would take that case and do litigation for one other simple reason. You spend $3 billion a year nationally on inspector generals, and they saved you close to $100 billion a year. That's a really good return on your investment. Now, Chris and I, governor, mayor, we hate inspector generals. They are a pain, but they're a good pain, and they're worth all the stress you get from them, because just like in April 2023, the inspector general of the FAA said, we don't have enough trainers for all the air traffic controllers. That's the type of work they do. Take that fight on, because that's a fight worth fighting for, and that's a hill worth dying on. And to me, you got to decide, some are litigation, some are communication, and some are going to be mobilization. And you got to decide which ones go into which category.
Finally, Chris, the president seems to be banking on the fact that Republicans in Congress are not going to press him on this.
Well, so far, it looks like they're not. I mean, Chuck Grassley said some things and wrote a letter. The question is, are they going to hold him to it or not? Look, Congress has to decide, are they an independent branch of government, or are they just going to be, in Republicans in the majority, are we just going to be rubber stamps? I think these votes on cabinet members coming up, whether it's RFK Jr. or Kash Patel, below cabinet, but a very important job at the FBI, are these people that they're going to confirm. And they're going to say, okay, we're going to turn over the national security. I thought the Patel hearing was really interesting. He's saying all this stuff's going to be protected once he's there. Well, what they're doing is doing all of the dirty work before he gets there. I mean, we're not stupid. We see what's happening here. They're having other people do it for him and then have him come in and not have to take responsibility for it. The idea that there's not communication going on right now, George, between the guy you've designated to be the head of the FBI for the next 10 years and the people who are doing this operation as acting members of leadership and justice is ridiculous. Of course they are. And the president is the one orchestrating this. I thought the most interesting answer in the hearing was when Cory Booker asked Kash Patel, have you had any conversations with the president about people to investigate or not to investigate? And his answer was, not to the best of my recollection.
Not credible?
Well, I mean, I kind of remember every conversation I've ever had with a president. How many are Akash Patel having that he doesn't remember? Come on.
Christie, Rahm Emanuel, thanks very much.